Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Note to File podcast, a collection of interviews, best practices, and candid commentary for clinical research sites. My guest today is Kim Talbot, founder of PRN of Kansas, a multi-specialty standalone research site in Wichita, Kansas. Kim holds a BSN from Wichita State and has been an APRN since 2001. On this episode, we talk about the importance of developing a diverse study pipeline, what makes a good clinical research coordinator, and the day-to-day of a research site owner. Without further ado, Kim Talbot. All right, Kim, thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to speak to you about clinical trials and all things.
Yeah, it's nice to also talk to somebody so close. You're our neighbor to the north up in Kansas there.
That's right, in Wichita, also fondly known as Doodah.
Dude, I've never heard that.
I don't know what the history of... Yeah, I don't know what the history is. There's something about that.
Fair enough. All I know about Wichita is it Wichita State Shockers? They have a nice baseball team.
Yes, and a amazing basketball team. We have it's Marshallville up here because, Coach Marshall has been around here for years.
Oh, okay.
We love him. Yes.
Very nice. Well, as I like to start with almost all my guests, I always find it fun to tell me a little bit about how you got into clinical research. It's usually people don't necessarily intend to start out that way, so I like to hear those stories. So please.
Yeah, the irony of it is that was one of my lowest grades in nursing school was research. But I was working in the intensive care unit at one of the local hospitals, and a cardiologist came up to me one day and said that they were looking for someone that has some clinical experience to help in their clinical trial department at their cardiology office. And I had recently had like a back injury and kind of was trying to go back to get my master's degree. So really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up as a nurse, but wanted to pursue something else. So this just landed in my lap. I said, all right, I'll go try it. And so I started working there, and within a year, they did some major administrative changes at that office, and that's when a gal that I was working with and I decided to take our process, what we're doing there, independent, and then we formed our own independent clinical trial site, and that way we could work with just about anybody in the city here in Wichita.
That's awesome. So you guys are a standalone site at this point.
Yes.
And it sounds like you started that out fairly soon after breaking into clinical research.
Yeah. Is that insanity or
no,
an absurd amount of confidence? I don't know.
Either way, it seems to have worked out. I think it's great. I think a lot of people sort of get wrapped up in these large institutions and never see that as an option. So That's awesome. And that's been quite some time now, right?
Yes, back in 2000.
2000.
So
that's awesome. Yeah,
year 20. Yeah, I have to tell people I started when I was 12 because the years kind of add up a little funky now. I'm like,
right.
Wait, am I that old?
So are you guys multi-specialty then?
Yes. Pretty much the two areas that we don't dive into are psych and oncology.
Yeah, I'd say that's I'm kind of in the same boat where, to me, it's just a good idea, I think, to be as diverse as you can. As you know, some therapeutic areas are hot and some aren't, and it's good to have, sort of hedge your bets a little bit. But yeah, I've kind of same thing. We haven't broken into oncology or psych so much, which is seems like its own realm to some degree.
Yeah, I think both of those are very niche-y and have their own rules to play by, even within our crazy rules.
Yeah, and I'd be curious. I mean, I've had sponsors ask me about working in oncology, and I just don't know how common it is to see, are there a lot of independent oncologists that, you wouldn't have to deal with a large institution with? Because I think that would actually be very interesting for sponsors to not have to work with local IRBs necessarily, or, again, sort of the bureaucracy that comes along with all these cancer centers or universities. I just don't know enough to know if is that even a common setup necessarily?
I would think that those trials that would be placed in say a physician's office that would be outside of an institution would have to do with some like peri-oncology, because you're talking about, chemotherapy infusions and things like that often happen within this facility, and it's very specialized. People are certified to administer those meds, and
Right.
so super niche-y. I wouldn't even pretend to be an expert, and I just know enough that this is not our wheelhouse whatsoever.
Sure. Well, fair enough. No, I love that. I love when people strike out on their own. What did you find to be the biggest challenge in doing that?
Back then, I think the challenge was just getting up on our feet and having some cash flow in that first year, because we had physician contacts, we had studies coming in, we were really energetic in going out into the community to educate people about what participating in trials would be. We went to the state fair and had a booth to educate people, sign people up so we could call them later. We did all kinds of out of the box thinking to get the word out. But it did take a good year. I remember skipping several paychecks during that year as we were trying to build that up. So that was probably our biggest challenge.
Yeah, no, I'd say I experienced the same thing. I think I talked to a lot of people who were trying to get started or start a network or a standalone site. So I think that's a nice little dose of reality. I mean, I went nearly a year without taking any kind of pay just to get this thing up and going. And I feel like you kind of end up, if you've got a great doctor, it's maybe hard to find a study for them, and you get a lead on a great study, you don't have the right doctor for it. So you spend a lot of time sort of reacting to what the market's doing, which,
right.
Again, it sounds like you guys are staying diverse enough that where you can kind of cover your bases when, I feel like there's a lot of great GI trials right now, but how long will that last?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. And we worked with mostly primary care doctors. We had a rheumatologist that was one of our specialties, just breaking out. But most of them were family practice. I don't know where you're at, Brad, but in Wichita, the specialists, it may take 3 to 6 months to get into this, to see them. So these guys are really super busy, and to add another thing to their plate is often just not even an option for them. Or if they think it's an option, they're delusional and they say, yeah, I can do it. And then they just are not a good investigator because they don't have that time.
Yeah, well, yeah, that definitely happens
Mm-hmm.
more than you want. Is that,
Right.
Oh, yeah, this is great. I got 100 patients and I got all the time in the world. And then you try to start working with them and you're like, wait a minute, I know better. I know better now.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, no, you learn fairly quickly to sort of vet as well as you can vet those investigators, but sometimes you don't know until it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
I think you just have to be like, okay, well, we can't go back to that well necessarily. But I mean, I find it's difficult, at least again, in my experience in what we do, I find it difficult to turn down an opportunity sometimes. So, when those opportunities present themselves, sometimes you do your best to cobble together the best effort you can give.
Yeah. I can think back on some of the years where the pipeline was just so dry that we took studies on, just like, well, we may be able to enroll a couple people. And then, 6-8 months, maybe 12 months down the road, we still have these horribly arduous studies still on our plate. And we just could get rid of that so we could focus on these other ones would be better, but we didn't know. We needed at least something to carry us through.
Yeah, no, I think that's just part of the process, especially as you're growing. I mean, we've certainly had the same problem where it's like, well, what else are we going to do? Let's take this study on. But then once you start to establish, and pretty soon that study's it doesn't quite get as much attention anymore because it's just not as easy to deal with. And
you've exhausted your resources.
Exactly. And I feel the same way sort of about a lot of phase 4 observational trials, kind of the same but different, that, yeah, you can enroll a lot of patients, but it's a lot of effort for maybe not as much good or as much payoff in the end. Mm-hmm. But sometimes helps get the bills paid too.
It does. It's sometimes good filler stuff. It'd be nice to pace it out a little bit. I think that's one of the bigger challenges too. Once now that we're established and we have our name in the database, we've done good work. So sponsors and CROs are coming back to us for repeat work, and we have really great doctors and relationships. And my team is stellar. I just have the best team ever. Is just trying to navigate the ebb and flow of the study pipeline. And I don't want to turn ones down, like you said, but if I keep taking them and taking them and taking them, then I have to increase my staff at some point.
Right.
I can't just hire temporary staff. That's ridiculous. You know how much training it takes to even get it to be able to touch a study.
Yeah, you could do a lot of time investing in your staff in this field to where, it's a horrible loss to train somebody for, 6 months to a year's worth of work and be like, all right, cool, see ya. Let's move on to the next person. That's just not. You hate to have to do that in this field, especially.
Yeah. And I've had nurse friends say, well, let me know if you need any extra help. I thought, well, that would be great. But by the time I got you GCP trained and then study specific trained,
right.
Damn,
and then you actually
over already.
Yeah, and by the time you actually understand what you're doing, then it's going to be too late by then.
Yes.
Well, sort of another interesting thing, you talk about nurses. Do you find that, nurses are your best resource for coordinators, or do you kind of work outside of that pool of potential employees?
In my early days, I had this, one of the business managers that I worked with, they were in this thought process that you couldn't hire nurses, have a full nursing staff because it's too expensive. And so we would hire a lot of MAs, and unless you have a good MA, and sometimes the good MAs are ones that just didn't go to nursing school or whatever, for whatever reason, but they are so smart and they're self-taught and they have so much experience of that. It's almost like finding a unicorn. Nurses, on the other hand, you could find someone that has a lot of experience, and that's usually your best person because you know that they're going to be watching out for that patient's safety on a level that you don't have to worry about something slipping and a patient's safety issue coming up and biting everybody in the backside. So I find that, right now I have myself as a nurse practitioner kind of looking over all labs and diagnostics just for weird, crazy, overt things that would need to be addressed. And then I have an RN that's got 8 years of research experience, and then an LPN that's got 2 years of research experience. And then but before they came here, they had years and years of clinic experience, and they're very knowledgeable about what to look out for and how to communicate that. And that's kind of dynamic trio that we have right now. It's awesome.
Yeah, I like that. I think LPN might be kind of just the right balance, maybe. And, I've worked in places where the prevailing theory is the opposite. They think that you have to be an RN to be a good research coordinator. I don't necessarily agree with. And I've seen a lot of great nurses come over to clinical research and just realize that the pace wasn't what they wanted. Depending on how busy you are or how many studies you're carrying, they may not. Or they felt as though they weren't getting enough patient care. They don't want to do, admin work and data entry. They'd rather be, working a floor or be doing something a little more direct with the patient. So
it's not for the adrenaline junkies, is it?
Right. No, it's not. Because there's as we kind of alluded to before, seems very feast or famine. Mm-hmm. There's either a ton of studies and a ton of patients coming through, or it can be just quiet.
Right.
It can be crickets for, days at a time sometimes. So I say that there's always something to do, but it's just very dynamic.
Yes, definitely. I think that's just the struggle with on the business side of things, to try to manage that well, because during the feast you have money to invest in training and equipment and things like that, but you also need to be stashing that away for the long, cold winter that may be coming up. And I don't mean this season, but
right.
Just the studies drying up.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge. I don't know. I've seen all kinds of tools people put together to try to sort of match their, staffing versus studies. But that's, again, I don't feel like there's a good, real scientific way to, necessarily suss that out until you're sometimes months deep in a study to where you realize, oh, this isn't going to enroll nearly as many patients as we thought.
Yeah.
And then occasionally the opposite, where you're like, oh, this study is actually going to take up way more of our time than we anticipated.
It's affirming to hear you say that, because I've been looking for that magical equation, and I don't think it exists either.
No, man, I've had people hand me forms that have, you can basically grade a study with a 1 through 10, and depending on what number you end up with, divide by 7, and that's how many.
Wow.
All kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm like, dude, this is a great idea, but it's not. This is almost just as much art as science sometimes to really, properly staff and work a study. And to do a study well really takes a certain almost laser focus to really knock out of the park, And I've worked in places where coordinators have 12 studies, at any given time, which just doesn't, pretty soon you can't do anything.
Yeah. And you get sloppy. Your data becomes really yucky. And yeah, we have a data entry person, and she's very much a control freak. So no one likes to do her job because she'll come back and make sure it's done correctly. And so there's just no point in double working, right? And she also does our regulatory stuff. So it helps with keeping the study coordinators focused on, if they have studies that are in startup, getting the logistics in order. And some of these are just so diagnostically burdened with all of that coordination. And then once they open for enrollment, they can focus on, what's the enrollment challenges. And then once the patients are enrolled, keeping them safe and following up on all of the things like the labs that are triggering this, that, and the other, follow-up assessments and things like that. And then I told my study nurse, I said, once your last subject is out of the study, it's back on my plate and Michelle's plate, because that's all regulatory now. It's all data and regulatory. It has nothing to do with the patient care.
Right. Yeah. No, I like that. So you do have sort of a centralized regulatory data entry position.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. And again, I like to sort of hear how, because everybody's structured so differently. I've been in places where it's everybody does everything, and then it's broken up into different roles. And I think they both have their sort of strengths and weaknesses. It sounds like you guys have a pretty tight-knit team. So as long as you communicate really well, I really like that idea of having some of those roles more centralized so that people can focus.
Yeah. I think that having someone else doing the data entry is an inherent built-in QC program, because if I'm putting my own data in, I sometimes get really lazy and say, oh, I know what that is. I'll just put that in. Well, it's clearly not documented there. It's the curse of knowledge, if you will. You're just too close to what you just did.
Yeah, you take for granted that, you know it. But yeah, if you hand it to a fresh set of eyes and they're like, they don't have the context to know, okay, what is this? Well, that's very much how an auditor would probably look at it.
Right.
They don't know what you assume that everyone else knows when you're entering your own data. Yeah, I like that. I like that sort of built-in quality check.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Very smart. So over the years, what do you really consider to be, a best practice or some best practices that you guys or you kind of follow? As
the business owner, and I guess, you're leader of the pack here, the thing that I have done that I'm the most proud of, that I feel has benefited both myself and the company at large and my employees, is investing in them, from allowing them to get good training opportunities outside of the clinic, but also working on communication. When we spend money going to technical educational things, learning our craft better, and we spend zero money on communication, which is the bane of most things, both personal and business. And
Sure.
So when I've done that, I've spent money on that kind of training and brought that into the culture. So in the last 10 years especially, I've worked on a culture that we have a core set of mantras, values that we adhere to, and then everybody that's brought in, I'm like, this is how it is. If you don't like working in this environment, then this is probably not a good place for you. But we don't like the drama, so we try to get a drama-free place. And so I think that's my best practices from a business perspective. And then from a clinical trials perspective, is really honing the process and making, like, when you develop your SOPs, a horrible process to do, but if it really mimics what you're doing and they're spot on, it's a perfect training tool. It's a perfect tool to have you stand up against monitors and auditors, and it's a dynamic document too. So it helps just give structure to everything that you do every day.
Yeah, and I like that, especially, if you're going back and reviewing your SOPs every quarter or 6 months or even a year.
Yeah,
you're right. It is very much a living document. So, you are constantly having to sort of reflect on the way you're doing things. Is this still the way we do it? Is this the best way to do it? You never end up with that. Again, places I've been where you say, well, this is the way it's always been done.
Ugh.
Well, okay, that's a terrible way to do it.
Terrible.
So that's not a good excuse. Let's not do it like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes back to what you said before. Something I'm beginning to appreciate more is really building your culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I'm still, myself, I'm still pretty new in my own venture here, but I'm learning more and more just how ridiculously important it is to really establish that culture and, invest in people beyond just an employee even,
Yeah.
Help them grow as humans if you can, along with being an employee, because, ultimately it pays off in the end and it's just the right thing to do.
Yes. If they're happy and satisfied here, they're going to be able to withstand the rockiness, like going through this whole COVID thing. Just almost, it's very impactful to me how loyal these people are through all this and what they've put up with, because you can't promise people a lot in this environment. We can't promise people a lot in a small business because, gosh, the insurance benefits alone change from year to year. That's annoying.
Right. Yeah. And I've seen other sites, have to furlough employees, and some of them outright shut down or, real close to it. So that's, again, a very underrated aspect of actually, again, building a good culture, building more than just a bunch of employees and building a team.
And as a woman-owned business, I also feel strongly that we have a different perspective on how we balance our family life with childcare and work-life balance in general. So I've worked with most of my employees have been women, not because I discriminate against men, because y'all are fabulous, but we have mother problems like pregnancies and sick kids and sick parents that we end up to be the caregivers of. So I feel like, and that's one of our covenants that we make with each employee here, is that when you're here at PRN, the business and mission are our top. PRN is the top priority. But if you need to take time off so that you can go take care of your family, go do that, so that when you come back, you can keep that priority at your focus.
Yeah, and again, I love that. Again, it's a lot that's sometimes very different than what you see across a lot of research sites or research organizations, where punching the clock is the most important thing, instead of we're out here to help people and get things done and work with high quality. And yeah, we all have lives. We'll have things that happen. So I love that. Again, just goes back to the culture that you build for your company.
Mm-hmm. You have to have a little grace with each other, as life is tough. And then you throw in a pandemic
right.
that infects your spouse's job, your kids' school. I mean, you have an innumerous amount of logistical issues. No one knows what to do, what to expect. Like I said, half of us think we're going to die, and the other half of us think it's a big conspiracy over here. So
right.
We just have to have a little grace with each other as we go through this.
Yeah, it's crazy times. Again, aside from clinical research aside, it's just crazy times.
Yeah.
So what are some resources you use, help you do your job better? I'm always looking for, especially things kind of outside the box that people use to kind of help them be more successful.
I think one of the most valuable lessons I've learned, and this isn't something I learned on my own, but to look at other disciplines. Don't just keep looking in medicine or in research in general. It's just look at other business practices, other art forms even. You get inspiration and different ways of looking at things by diversifying your exposure to your information. So don't just read the medical journals.
Yeah, no, that again, I think that's a perfect point, that we so oftentimes sort of live in this little box in clinical research. Yeah, there's taking a more multidisciplinary approach and incorporating things that are popular in other industries. For me, it was sometimes something simple like using a CRM tool to track business development. Mm-hmm. Well, in a lot of places I go or have been, again, everyone's using Excel spreadsheets to do, almost everything. Well, why don't we just use the technology that salespeople use? We're not reinventing the wheel here, mm-hmm. but that can make you more efficient at what you do. And that's just a offhand example, but I like the bigger point of incorporating things that are already successful outside of clinical research, even outside of medicine.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the we were one of those little, I don't know what you call them, little, not really memes, but is from the food industry. Have you ever heard of that little phrase that they use called mise en place? It's a French thing.
I know. I don't think I know about that.
So when you're working in a really high-speed restaurant, you have to make sure that all of your tools, all of your utensils, everything is clean and at arm's reach. So everything in a place and a place for everything is essentially what mise en place means. And so when we are trying to set up for a really busy day, we have your charts out, your labs pulled, you've made sure you got all your supplies, you have mise en place right there. And so you have adapted a philosophy of an industry that's totally different than what you're doing, but it's a process that helps you be prepared and spot on with everything that you need to do.
Oh yeah, I love that, and that's probably something a lot of us do without even recognizing it. Of just you get your source documents ready, you got your lab kit ready, you got everything lined up and ready to go. No, I love that.
That's just a fun thing, just to kind of find that in other places, and then you're like, oh, I love that. That's a French thing. Let's do that.
Right. Right. Well, and that speaks to a bigger picture of always learning and growing and incorporating that into what you do, which, isn't always the case for everyone. For some people, it's just a job to do, but you can really add some extra love to what you do by incorporating everything you can learn into that.
Right.
So I love that. Anything else, any other words of wisdom before we kind of wrap up to? I think we blew through about 30 minutes. That went quickly.
Well, yeah, it's always fun chatting about what you love to do every day. Boy, I just, I would love to hear your words of wisdom really on weathering the storms of research, but it sounds like you and I are on the same page as some of the challenges and the ways to look at it.
Yeah, no, I think we have sounds like very similar philosophies. And if you want to come back and we can do this again, I'd love to do it. I'm looking to share as much as possible with the clinical research community. I think there's a dangerous lack of good resources and good information out there for people who want to go down this path. They don't have to go down it alone. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of people out there who've done it and are doing it successfully. I mean, hell, I'll probably I'll be calling you for advice here before too long. I'm sure.
We can always commiserate, that's for sure.
Yeah. There's no lack of that by any means.
Yeah.
So where can people find you online?
Well, we have a website that's PRN of Kansas.com, and then we have a Facebook page. I think I sent a link over there for that. We're not real active on that. On basically any social media, it's just not something that has done well for us. I don't know, you're probably more into that kind of stuff, Brad, than I am. And do you find that there's a lack of that type of connection in the industry amongst our professionals?
Yeah, probably
Okay.
so. In truth, I mean, I'm no expert by any means, but I've been relatively successul with Facebook ads for studies. Mm. But you know what? I think that's a great topic for another podcast.
Yeah.
We should I think we should talk to somebody who's professional at doing that, because I think there's probably a lot to be learned. But yeah, you're right. I think it's challenging and it's not easy to do on your own. So there's probably plus there's a lot of people that are kind of scared off by the potential regulatory issues they might create by doing that, getting a proper approval and et cetera.
Yeah. We have so many restrictions that kind of makes a marketing person's job very boring.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you can't be artistic about it.
Right. Yeah, we sort of have to have it very so and not outside the box. And I know I like that as an idea for some potential future content. So
yeah, there's a couple good people out there like Study Kick and oh gosh, what was the other one that I recently talked to that seemed like they were on the. They had a pulse of the situation really well.
Yeah, and we've used we've used just about everything there is to use. So I'd like to do a series about all the different companies and sort of compare. Again, just for people who don't know, I don't think there's a lot of good comparative information out there about using vendors like that.
That'd be fun. I
like it. Well, very good. I'm going to put a link to your contact information. It'll be at notetofilepodcast.com.
Okay.
And I want to thank you so much for coming on, and please come back anytime.
Great. Oh, I appreciate the ability to have this conversation with you. I love this format. Thank you for doing this.
All right. Thanks, Kim. As always, thank you for listening to the Note to File podcast. Please check us out at notetofilepodcast.com for full episode transcripts, show notes, and contact information for our guests. Thanks again.